Coming up on Arirang News. North Korea fires 2 short-range ballistic missiles off its east coast just before midnight on Monday in an apparent protest against the U.S. sending a nuclear submarine to South Korea. Top nuclear envoys of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo agreed to sternly respond. After more than 7 decades, the remains of 7 Korean soldiers are coming back home from the U.S. Tonight, we also hear from 3 foreigners visiting the nation who fought for the independence of this country during the Korean War. South Korea's Constitutional Court dismisses National Assembly's impeachment vote of Safety Minister Lee Sang-min, saying he did not violate any laws when responding to last Halloween's Itaewon crowd crush. Rival parties clash over this. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with North Korea firing yet another round of ballistic missiles, this time at around midnight on Monday. It was an apparent protest against the U.S. sending a nuclear submarine to South Korea. This has prompted a firm response from Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Bae Eun-ji reports.
At about midnight, North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the sea off its east coast. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said Tuesday that it detected that they were launched from areas near Pyongyang. One was fired 5 minutes before midnight, then another at midnight on Tuesday. They flew around 400 kilometers before falling into waters off the east coast. This appears to be a protest against the deployment of a U.S. nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Annapolis, that arrived at a naval base on South Korea's southern island of Jeju on Monday.
Intelligence authorities of South Korea and the US are analyzing further details about the launch. Recently, the regime has been engaging in provocations late at night or in the early hours of the morning, so the authorities are analyzing North Korea's intentions behind that as well.
The 6,000-ton USS Annapolis is not nuclear-armed, as it's equipped with conventional weapons, but it is one of the main U.S. nuclear-powered submarines in terms of scale.
This shows the North's intention to respond militarily to Seoul's strategic assets. It could also be interpreted as Pyongyang's willingness to lead the tensions on the Korean peninsula.
Also, the launch may have been carried out to strengthen solidarity for the upcoming Victory Day in North Korea, which celebrates the 70 years of the Korean War's armistice. Meanwhile, top nuclear envoys of South Korea, the US, and Japan held phone talks on Tuesday morning and strongly condemned the launch. The Foreign Ministry says the 3 sides agreed to firmly respond to all kinds of missile launches from the north based on trilateral security cooperation. They also discussed the issue of the Chinese delegation's upcoming visit to North Korea to take part in the regime's Victory Day celebrations, scheduled for this week. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
North Korea is poised to host its first foreign delegation in years since the coronavirus outbreak. Not just the Chinese delegation, but also Russian one has been invited for the regime's so-called Victory Day celebration this week. Moon Hae-ryun reports.
After 3 years and 6 months, North Korea is set to receive its first foreign delegation. It has invited Chinese and Russian delegations to mark the 70th anniversary of the armistice of the Korean War on Thursday, known as Victory Day by the regime. According to the North Korean Central News Agency on Monday, the invited Chinese delegation is led by Lee Hong-sung, a member of the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. The invitation extended to Russia's Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, was announced the following day. This visit will mark the very first official visit by foreign guests in a shift in policy. Since the COVID-19 outbreak in 2020, North Korea has closed its borders, only partially resuming cargo transportation with China last year. The only known case of a foreign guest visiting the regime was back in March, when China's new ambassador to North Korea, Wang Yajun, took up the post. North Korea has also been taking part in international events, with ambassador-level representatives already overseas. This includes the ASEAN Regional Forum for the past 3 years, with this year's forum also attended by its ambassador to Indonesia, An Kwang-il, instead of its foreign minister, Choi Sun-hee. The invited Chinese delegations took part in a memorial ceremony for those who fought in the war on Tuesday, according to a Chinese newspaper. The delegations visiting the country this Thursday are expected to attend the celebratory military parade and meet with its leader, Kim Jong-un. Observers largely see the North's first post-pandemic foreign guest coming from China and Russia as a apparent show of their ties against South Korea, the US, and Japan. But eyes are on whether North Korea could resume other exchanges with China, perhaps in flights and trains, or keep it at high-level diplomacy for the time being. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Marking the 70th anniversary of the Korean Armistice Agreement, the remains of 7 Korean soldiers who died in the Korean War are returning home from the United States. According to the Defense Ministry on Tuesday, a repatriation ceremony attended by Vice Defense Minister Shin Bum-chul and Admiral John Aquilino, the commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, will take place on Wednesday morning in Hawaii. The Korean military's KC-330 aircraft will then carry the remains and arrive at the Seoul Air Base in the evening. Following a welcoming ceremony, they'll be sent to the Defense Ministry to undergo DNA testing for identification. The remains were sent to the U.S. after Pyongyang in 1990 resumed repatriating fallen soldiers who fought in the war, but that stopped in 1954. 3 foreign veterans from the US, Britain, and Canada who fought in the Korean War are visiting this country again more than 70 years after the conflict. Our Kim Jong-sil has their story about witnessing Korea then and now.
Korean War veterans Edward Buckner, William Ward, and Colin Thackeray are visiting the country whose independence they fought for so many years ago. They were invited here by South Korea's Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs to mark the 70th anniversary of the armistice that ended the conflict. All are from different countries and have backgrounds, but the veterans share one thing in common. They fought for Korea, a foreign land. Having witnessed the tragedy of the war, the veterans expressed their impressions of Korean people during that time.
You had, just like I've always said, you had to be there to see it. But the Korean people deserve a hell of a lot because they were the heroes. They really were. To live this thing out, and it was just something else.
Yeah. Veteran William Ward added that he's proud of having fought for Korea and that he'll do it all over again. They took the moment to look for someone too. Canadian veteran Edward Buckner said he's looking for a Korean boy who used to clean his military tent during the war.
Do you remember his name?
Yes. I forget it. Jungkook song. I've had that picture all along.
The Canadian veteran also showed strong emotion when thinking back on the war.
I am so grateful that you took what you got and made it what you have. It's a beautiful country.
British-Korean War veteran Colin Thackeray expressed his impressions on being back in Seoul.
Coming to Seoul for the first time, and I was amazed because last time we saw it was flat.
Yeah.
Now there's just hundreds and hundreds of towers of apartment blocks, and I congratulate the Korean people on the success and the prosperity that they should now show.
War veteran and also something of a singer, Colin expressed his feelings about being asked to sing a Korean traditional folk song, Arirang, at a Korean War Armistice event to be held in Busan.
Arirang brings a lot of memories because I don't think many servicemen that served in Korea at that time don't know that song because it's very familiar to everybody. And when I was asked to sing it at the banquet tomorrow, I was very delighted.
The three veterans from different countries seem to have found a reason why they fought for Korea. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
President Yoon today met the Prime Minister of Luxembourg and the Governor-General of New Zealand, who are in the country to commemorate 70 years of the ceasefire between the two Koreas and the hundreds of thousands of UN troops who helped the South. Our Oh Soo-young has the details.
President Yoon expressed hope for stronger ties with Luxembourg on Tuesday as he met with the country's leader Xavier Bettel, accompanied by a 93-year-old veteran of the Korean War, Leong Moyang. Meeting with Moyang, who was wounded in 1951 but volunteered for a second tour, the president said the Korean people will never forget his courage and devotion to defending the freedom of a faraway country in the 1950-53 war.
처음에 총상을 입고 일본으로 후송이 돼서 치료를 받은 다음에 다시 또 참전하겠다고 해서 한국전에 부상 치료를 받고 또 참전을 하셨는데 어떻게 해서 그렇게 용기 있게 두 번이나 참전을 결심하게 되셨나요?
I was hospitalized for 4 months as I injured my left leg. There was a puncture in the bone. I couldn't use my legs.
The United Nations says Luxembourg sent 110 troops in total and lost 2 in action, with 17 wounded. In his talks with the Prime Minister, Yoon expressed his appreciation for Luxembourg's dispatch of its troops to defend the freedom and democracy of South Korea. To expand bilateral ties going forward, Yoon and Bettel agreed to boost trade and investment and strengthen cooperation in space and quantum science. To facilitate greater communication, Bettel noted that Luxembourg is preparing to establish an embassy in Seoul within the year. Touching on geopolitical issues, the two leaders agreed to work together to address North Korea's growing nuclear and missile threats. Bettel added that Yoon's recent visit to Ukraine was highly significant and called for their continued solidarity and support for Kyiv. The South Korean president on Tuesday held another one-on-one meeting with New Zealand Governor-General Cindy Kiro, also thanking the country's veterans for their sacrifice and dedication. The back-to-back meetings were held ahead of a ceremony this week marking the 70th anniversary of the Armistice Agreement that stopped active fighting between the two Koreas, which also coincides with UN Forces Participation Day on Thursday. Officials from some 22 nations have been invited to Seoul this week, representing the countries that fought alongside the South as part of the UN forces. The Veterans Ministry says the country sent a total of 1.96 million troops and medical personnel to aid the South. Among them, nearly 38,000 were killed and over 103,000 were wounded. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Marking the 70th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice Agreement, South Korea and France conducted their first ever air drills. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung was at the site.
South Korea and France held their first ever joint air exercises over the skies of Busan on Tuesday. The training comes as part of France's annual Pegasus 23 mission, which is aimed at increasing its military presence and influence in the Indo-Pacific region. The mission involves the deployment of tens of aircraft from France to the Indo-Pacific to promote cooperation with regional countries, especially with partners like South Korea.
Establishing a mutual understanding on issues in this region. It's a process of jointly preparing solutions in various fields, whether that be issues regarding security, the environment, or the pandemic.
The Korean Air Force participated with 3 F-15Ks and 2 F-16 fighters, while the French Air and Space Force fielded 2 Rafale fighters, the country's key fighter aircraft capable of performing various combat missions, including nuclear deterrence, as well as 1 A400M transport aircraft and an A330 multi-role tanker transport.
These fighter jets from both countries also flew over the UN Memorial Cemetery in Busan to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice Agreement on Thursday.
More than 40 French veterans who have dedicated their lives to the Korean War are buried in Busan's UN Memorial Cemetery.
We, the people of the Republic of Korea, have not forgotten the help provided by over 20 UN countries during the Korean War. I think it is very meaningful to have their descendants gather and train together.
The French Air and Space Force is on a 3-day stop in South Korea until Wednesday. Although it's a short period of time, both South Korea and France hope to further expand their military exchanges in the future by sharing each other's know-how and conducting joint exercises in various locations. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News, Busan.
South Korea's Constitutional Court dismisses National Assembly's impeachment vote of safety Minister Lee Sang-min, saying he did not violate any laws when responding to last Halloween's Itaewon crowd crush. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
South Korea's Constitutional Court on Tuesday unanimously rejected the opposition-controlled National Assembly's impeachment motion against Interior Minister Lee Sang-min, allowing him to return to duty 167 days after he was suspended. In its ruling, the 9-justice court headed by Justice Lee Jong-seok noted that, quote, although Lee did not make the best decisions in disaster response as the Interior Minister, it is difficult to say that he significantly breached his obligations as laid out by the Constitution, such as the Framework Act on the Management of Disasters and Safety and the State Public Officials Act. The court also said the tragedy in Itaewon was not down to one specific cause or person, but due to the lack of clear manuals on safety management of events without an organizer, and due to a lack of comprehensive response capabilities in dealing with large-scale disasters. This is the first impeachment ruling on a minister since the beginning of South Korea's constitutional government. It comes 269 days after the deadly crowd crush in Itaewon late last year, which killed 159 people, and nearly 6 months after the vote to impeach Lee.
Back in February, the opposition-controlled National Assembly voted to impeach Minister Lee, holding him responsible for government failures in planning and responses that likely contributed to the large number of casualties.
Prior to the ruling, the court held 4 public hearings participated in by Minister Lee, the Assembly, officials from the Interior Ministry, the National Police Agency, and the National Fire Agency, as well as bereaved family members of those killed in the tragedy. For an impeachment to be endorsed, at least 6 out of 9 justices have to vote in favor. A leading constitutional scholar explained that although there is no doubt that the unfortunate tragedy claimed many victims, that doesn't directly translate to legal responsibility.
Moral responsibility is not one of the criteria for impeachment judgments in South Korea. The Constitutional Court saw that in purely legal terms, the minister was not legally responsible.
Meanwhile, after the court's decision, an official from the presidential office said that the majority opposition in the assembly abused its impeachment right and will be judged by the public for such, quote, unconstitutional behavior. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Korea's economy slightly expanded in the second quarter amid imports falling greater than exports. Our Lee Soo-jin explains.
South Korea's economy has grown for the second consecutive quarter. Data from the Bank of Korea released on Tuesday shows that the country's gross domestic product adjusted for inflation rose 0.6% on quarter during the April to June period of this year. The nation narrowly avoided falling into recession, typically defined as 2 consecutive quarters of economic contraction, in the first quarter by achieving a growth rate of 0.3%. This is the second straight quarter that the country has seen economic growth. The central bank attributed the on-quarter growth to the rise in net exports. Net exports rose in the second quarter as total imports fell more sharply compared to total exports. Imports dropped 4.2% compared to exports falling 1.8%.
The growth was led by the increase in net exports from the larger decline in imports. Imports fell sharply, mostly due to decreased imports of natural gas and oil.
Private consumption, however, fell 0.1% compared to the previous quarter, mainly due to the decrease in spending on food and accommodation. Government expenditure dropped nearly 2% on the back of decreased spending on Social Security benefits. Investment in construction and facilities also each tumbled 0.3% and 0.2% amid the sluggish demand for transportation equipment.
In-person activities fell partly due to poor weather conditions, but these are temporary factors.
Meanwhile, South Korea's gross national income, the total amount of money earned by people and businesses, remained unchanged from the previous quarter, despite the rise in real GDP as trade conditions remain sluggish. The Bank of Korea said that if the nation's economy grows 0.7% on quarter during both the third and fourth quarters, it will be able to meet this year's economic growth outlook of 1.4%. 이수진, 아리랑 뉴스.
South Korea's Hwang Sun-woo has swam his way onto the podium at the World Aquatics Championships in Japan for the second year in a row. On Tuesday in Fukuoka, Hwang came in third place, securing a bronze medal in the 200-meter freestyle finals with a record time for South Korea of 1 minute 44.42 seconds. It's the first time that a South Korean swimmer has secured medals at international swimming events 2 years in a row, following Hwang's second-place finish last year in Budapest in the same category. The World Swimming Championships will be taking place until Sunday, with Hwang scheduled to compete in the preliminaries for the 100-meter freestyle. On the K-pop front, BTS member Jungkook's solo single 7 has hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The feat makes him the second Korean soloist to stand at the top of this chart after bandmate Jimin made headlines 3 months ago. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Less than 2 weeks since the release of his first official solo single, BTS's Jungkook saw himself and his song 7 at the top of the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart on Monday. According to the Billboard chart released Monday, 7 has sold 153,000 song downloads and CD singles combined, while drawing 21.9 million streams and 6.4 million radio airplay audience impressions. The Billboard Hot 100 chart asked the most popular songs of the week in the US across all genres, including streaming, radio airplay, and sales data. Interestingly, yet not surprisingly, Jungkook becomes just the second South Korean solo artist since his fellow group member Jimin topped the chart in April with his single Like Crazy. As a group, BTS and their songs Dynamite, a remix of Savage Love, Life Goes On, Butter, Permission to Dance, and My Universe all topped the Billboard Hot 100 charts, making the K-pop stars a regular at the top of the list. Jungkook is also the sixth member of the 7-piece group to have debuted as a solo artist. 7 is a pop song featuring American female rapper Latto and entered the British official singles chart at #3. After its official release on July 14th, it also debuted at #1 on the iTunes charts in 106 countries, as well as Spotify's daily top song global chart. 이 승재, 아리랑 뉴스.
Monsoon showers will continue across South Korea until tomorrow. The good news is that torrential downpours have subsided and the amount of rainfall will get a tad lighter than today. Central regions, parts of Chungcheongdo and Gyeongsangnam-do provinces will see up to 80 millimeters. The capital region, Jeollado province and Jeju Island can expect up to 60 millimeters. While showers are coming and going, temperatures will be on a rising trend from this point on. Highs in Seoul will get up to 30 degrees Celsius tomorrow, along with scattered outbreaks of rainfall. Although the amount of rainfall is fairly trivial, the ground is already very weak from previous downpours. Please continue to take extra precautions. Morning temperatures in Seoul and Gwangju will start off at 25 degrees. Aside from Busan, the entire nation will be under rainy spells. Seoul will get up to 30 degrees, Daejeon and Gwangju 31, Gyeongju will be reaching 34 degrees. On Saturday, central regions and Jeollado provinces will see showers. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for tonight's newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with the most up-to-date news tomorrow. Good night.